all of us as minorities must stand together to say, there but for us goes someone else the next time?
Well, the concern of the Founding Fathers was not only the democratic rights of the majority to engage in self-government. Their major concerns in constructing the Constitution was the rights of minority, what they called either factions or groups in this country. And when I see the religious leaders of one pretty large religious community in this country say that this government mandate will force us, or is seeking to force us, to violate a tenet of our faith, and to see then the administration say, well, that's too bad, then smaller denominations or faiths in this country begin to wonder, well, not only is this an outrageous violation of one particular faith's religious freedom, it's quite frightening to all of us who care about our own religious freedom.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the panel for being here today. Thank you for your voice that you've stated very clearly. In the Declaration of Independence, it refers to unalienable rights. How do you understand unalienable rights? What is the meaning to you? Please.
Thank you. Inalienable means that they are inherent in the human person, and they are inherent in the human person because they have been put there by the Creator, and that they are, as John F. Kennedy said in his inaugural, they are not given by the generosity of the state, but by the hand of God.
I assume all of the rest of you would agree to that? Let me ask a follow-up question. Should your parishioners, speaking especially of those of you, Bishop Laurie, as well as Reverend Harrison, should your parishioners who are body shop owners or lawyers, whatever, have First Amendment rights of conscience?
They most definitely should.
Regardless of being an institution or not?
Yes, institutional rights rest on the foundation of individual rights. And it's clearly the teaching of the Church in its Declaration on Religious Liberty that we begin really with individual rights. And so it ought to be possible in this country, if one wishes, to have a business, let's say, run on Christian principles, where people agree to work in such a business, and where insurers and employers and employees all come together and agree how that's all going to work.
Reverend Harrison?
I agree completely. It's surreal. This whole conversation is utterly surreal. If the Supreme Court can uphold the rights of a tiny sect to use a hallucinogenic drug in its religious rights, how is it that our fundamental rights of conscience over long established moral principle, virtually unchanging in the history of Christianity, is somehow dismantled? And I find it totally offensive that we are subject to accommodations and grandfather clauses. You can't accommodate and you can't grandfather clause the First Amendment. It is our right.
Martin Luther would express appreciation for your intensity of position on that. In recent weeks, I've had the dubious privilege of sitting in hearings where I've heard the Constitution being attacked, being denigrated. When I've heard people at that table speak about constitutional niceties, not dealing with the real world of today. When I've heard a justice of the Supreme Court refer to the fact that new forming constitution nations ought to look away from our Constitution and ought to look to some other constitutions. It's unbelievable. And then we come to this time when, in fact, constitutional liberties are being stepped upon, trounced upon, not only for institutions but for individuals, as you've very clearly stated in the area of religion and conscience. I'm a minister. I was formerly a pastor. I'm glad to see you gentlemen here. I would encourage you, with great respect, to speak with clarity, to call for your congregations to understand the power of freedom and liberty. And as Jonathan Witherspoon, who happened to be a member of Congress and a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a signer of the Constitution, stated very clearly, a republic once equally poised must either preserve its virtue or lose its liberty. John Adams followed, saying that liberty once lost is liberty lost forever. And let me finish by one statement, and I would ask for...
The gentleman can have an additional 15 seconds.
Thank you,
Only.
Mr. Chairman. I don't normally quote from Joseph Stalin, but today he said something appropriate about liberty. He said, America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, it's morality, it's spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. I would encourage the church, I would encourage Congress, I would encourage our administration to fight back strongly against what Stalin understood and against what his principles, if he would have carried them out, would have accomplished through these processes.
The gentleman's time has expired. I presume the gentleman brought Stalin up only to put him down.
Absolutely, and I think I brought him
the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was waiting. Yeah, I was waiting for the picture of Stalin to prepare before us. But one of the things I enjoy about this place is that we quote Reagan to counter your arguments, and you sometimes quote Kennedy to counter ours. So I did find the.
I've got Martin Luther King ready too.
I know. I'm sure. What we did was we found the actual speech that Mr. President Kennedy, as a candidate, gave before the Greater Houston Ministerial Association, September 12, 1960. He said, because I am Catholic and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately. Comes to mind what's happening today. I believe in America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any ecclesiastical source. He also says, I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me. Whatever issue may come before me as president, on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, or any other subject, I will make my decision in accordance with these views, in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be the national interest, and without regard to outside religious pressures or dictates, and no power or threat of punishment could cause me to decide otherwise. Just to give the full context of that, and if I would ask without objection if this transcript could be included in the record.
Without objection, so ordered. I'm pleased. Would the gentleman yield briefly?
Sure.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more that we need to put it all into context of what government might consider at government expense. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bishop, and I ask these questions as I recognize members on the other side were concerned, with the greatest respect. But it helps us understand how far this can go, because for me the question sometimes comes to where does the conscience decision lie? Does it lie with a group of men as the panel today, or the Council of Bishops? Who does it lie with? Does it lie with the individual woman to make those decisions? And also, do you support this the same policy that you have as it relates to the private sector? In other words, do you think that a fast food restaurant person can, because of his moral objections, say to his employees, I'm not going to provide birth control as well? Or larger corporations?
If there is real religious liberty in our country, then churches, even if there is disagreement within those churches, have the God-given right to run their own institutions and their own internal affairs according to their teachings. And if there should be discussion within that church or even dissent within that church, it is not for the government to reach in and to decide or to weigh in on one side or the other. The fact of the matter is that a lot of people like to work for the Catholic Church. That's one I can speak for, because they like to work for mission. They understand that when they sign up to work for a diocese or a Catholic school or for Catholic charities, what the teaching is. We have an organized magisterium with the Pope and the bishops, and that sometimes people agree with it, sometimes they don't, but they love the mission and they come and work. We have no trouble retaining and attracting people to work for us. We provide great health care plans, but you know, under these rules, we might have the best health care plan in the world, but if even one of these so-called preventive services were not in our plan, we'd be fined $2,000 per employee.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'm sorry, I'm just so short on time. Bishop, getting to the question, do you believe that a private sector company, if the owner or the board have moral objections, for the same moral objections you do, which I respect, do you think they have a right to deny offering contraceptive services?
I think that that freedom obtains right now. It already obtains. They can already do that. And
we're talking about legislation, Bishop, and there's legislation also proposed right now that would extend this to the private sector.
We're saying that this legislation should not do so. We've been able to have that freedom now, and the world has not fallen in upon itself.
The gentleman's time has expired. We now recognize the gentleman from Ohio. We have the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Burkle, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin by saying what an honor it is to have you here before us this morning and to hear your profound defense of First Amendment rights in a time when there's so much discussion and debate about this. It's so uplifting for me to listen to so many different denominations talk about religious freedom, because I believe that's the reason, as was so clearly stated by many of you, why this country, why people came to this country, and why they continue to come to this country, because we offer a freedom of exercising of religion. So thank you very much for being here this morning. I am a nurse. I've spent most of my professional career both as a nurse and a healthcare attorney. I am a mother. I've been blessed with 6 children and soon to be 13 grandchildren. So I feel like I can speak to this issue. And I really find it so objectionable that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would characterize this as an issue as narrow as contraceptive or abortion or sterilization. This is a fundamental assault on one's conscience. And folks who don't believe in God, or folks who do believe in God, or believe in a certain, it's an affront to each and every American's conscience. So to try to narrow this down into a contraceptive or a woman's health issue, I'm so appalled that that's the approach. This is a fundamental assault on our First Amendment rights, and we have to challenge the media, and as my colleague mentioned, challenge the churches to articulate this is the issue. This is a First Amendment assault, and we need to defend our Constitution.